My daughter received an empty gift, and then she gave one in return, and everything changed. I will never forget the sound of the wrapping paper being torn. It was the only sound everyone heard, no music, no laughter, just the soft rustle as my daughter Sarah carefully unwrapped her gift. Her little fingers tugged at the corners as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And for a moment, she even smiled, that soft, hopeful smile that appears on children's faces when they still believe in miracles. But when she opened the box, her face changed. First, there was confusion, then something deeper, perhaps pain. Her little shoulders tensed. I realized this before she could say anything. The box was empty, just bare cardboard, no napkin, no toy, no note, nothing. I blinked, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. A mistake, maybe something fell out, or someone forgot to put the gift inside. But before I could open my mouth, I heard him, my father Frank. He let out a sharp, short laugh, cold as a dog's bark in winter. Leaning back in his chair, he crossed his arms and said, "People like her shouldn't expect anything in this world. It's full of freeloaders as it is." My heart sank. Sarah froze, her hands still in the box, as if she hoped the gift was just hiding under the flaps or in a corner. But there was nothing. I felt a flush of heat in my chest, my hands trembling on my knees, wanting to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat like splinters. Then Sandra, my sister, snorted and muttered, "She's just like her mother, always expecting handouts. Worthless." My jaw clenched. I felt the muscles in my face tighten, the sting behind my eyes ready to burst. I forced myself to look at Sarah. She hadn't started crying yet, but her lips were tightly pressed together, and her chin quivered as it does before everything falls apart. Her big, soft eyes filled with tears that she was too proud to shed. She looked at me again, not asking for help but checking if she should pretend it didn't hurt. And at that moment, I hated myself. I hated myself for bringing her here, for foolishly hoping for a normal Christmas, thinking my father could change, that they would see in Sarah the beautiful, kind, creative girl I love and love her too. But they didn't see her. To them, she was just an extension of me, a reminder of my divorce, my failure, the chows they thought I had made of my life. The room was filled with a dead silence. Only the heater hummed softly, and the grandfather clock behind Frank's chair ticked away. Each tick sounded louder than the last, as if counting down to a moment I wasn't ready for. Sarah looked at the empty box again, her fingers touching the edge, and then she slowly closed the flaps. Her hands were trembling now. Then she whispered, "I also prepared a gift for you, Grandpa." Everyone turned around. Frank looked up, still wearing that smug smirk. "Oh, really?" he said, half smirking. "This should be interesting." But Sarah didn't back down. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper folded with such care that my heart ached. She stepped forward and offered it to him with both hands. And at that moment, I knew this wasn't the end, that something was coming that none of us were ready for. I hadn't been home for Christmas in over 2 years, not since the divorce, not since the shame and everything I tried to hold together finally fell apart. It was Sarah who wanted to see them, 3 weeks before Christmas. She asked Mom, "Do I have a grandpa?" She was trying to understand why we were always alone on holidays, why we didn't have matching pajamas, huge trees, or cousins to run around with. I said yes, and when she asked if we could visit him this year, I said yes, against my better judgment. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought time had softened them, maybe for a moment I believed that seeing Sarah, really looking at her, they would feel warmth, regret, love, something. But as soon as we pulled up to the house, I felt that old heaviness settle on my shoulders again, the invisible tension that squeezes your ribs like barbed wire when you try to smile at people who don't want you there. Their house hadn't changed, still cold, perfect, more like a museum than a home. My mother greeted us with that artificial politeness she had perfected over the years, a quick hug for me, a light pat on the head for Sarah. Her gaze lingered too long on the scuffs on Sarah's boots. I noticed how she assessed her, like an item on a shelf, deciding if she fit in. Sandra barely looked up from her phone when we entered, giving Sarah a half-hearted greeting before returning to her screen. My stomach was already in knots. And then there was Frank, my father. He sat in his usual chair by the fireplace, a glass of whiskey in one hand and the TV remote in the other. He didn't even stand up, just nodded and grunted, "Didn't think you'd actually show up." That was his greeting. Sarah waved at him shilly, her mittens peeking out from her sleeve. "Hey, Grandpa," she said softly, as if trying out the word for the first time. He huffed. I don't know why I still hoped for more. Maybe because Sarah tried so hard. She made little drawings for everyone, carefully colored, folded, and tucked into envelopes with names on the front. She even asked how to spell Aunt Sandra's name because she wanted everything to be perfect. She worked on them every night for a whole week. I wanted this to be special for her to feel like she had a family, flawed as it was. I gathered everything I could, from tips and side jobs to buy her a nice outfit, a little gift, and gas to get there. That morning, as I tied her scarf, she looked at me and asked, "Do you think they'll like my drawings?" I replied, "Sweetheart, they'll love them." But deep down, I already knew the truth. I was taking her to a house where kindness was doled out like a currency they never had enough of, where smiles were rationed and love came with conditions. I still tried, convincing myself it was for Sarah, not for me, that I could hold my head high, be nice, pretend for one day that everything was okay. But watching her heart quietly break in front of them over such a cruel joke as an empty box, I realized they hadn't changed, and I wasn't sure they ever would. Sarah handed out her little envelopes as if they were treasures. She moved around the room so carefully, as if afraid to disturb anything. Each envelope had a name written in her neat print. First, she gave one to my mom, then to Sandra, and even to my brother Matt, who had barely said a word since we arrived. When she got to Frank, she paused for a moment, long enough for me to hold my breath. But then she smiled, lifted the envelope, and said, "Merry Christmas, Grandpa." He didn't look away from the TV, just held out his hand as if she were delivering the mail, not offering a piece of herself. Sarah returned to the couch and sat next to me, her face still glowing with hope. She didn't understand how cold the room had become. Then Frank took a large box from under the tree. It was wrapped in silver paper with a red bow, almost too perfectly. He handed it to Sarah with a grunt. Her eyes widened. She looked at me first, as if seeking permission. I nodded, though something tightened in my stomach. She slid off the couch and pulled the box toward her. Her little hands glided over the paper as if it were something sacred. She wanted to remember this. Then she lifted the lid and looked inside. I saw the exact moment she realized the box was empty. Her face didn't crumple immediately. Instead, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. She reached inside as if something might be stuck at the bottom. She looked at me uncertainly. There was nothing in the box. Frank laughed loudly, expecting something real. He sneered, leaning back. "The world doesn't hand out gifts just because you show up, kid." Sarah blinked, her hands frozen. I couldn't move. Then Sandra, always ready to sting, added from the couch, "But she's just like her mom, always expecting something to be handed to her." Nothing surprising there. It hit me in the chest like a punch. I turned to her. "Sandra, stop," I said. She raised an eyebrow, smirking. "It's the truth," she replied. Sarah was silent now. The box still lay on her lap, flaps wide open, revealing the emptiness inside. The room had turned away from her, and I saw her realize it. I hated them for making her feel small, for making her doubt her worth, for laughing as if it were a joke. I reached out to her, but she didn't move. She just stared at the box as if it might fill up if she waited long enough. Inside, I was screaming, "Say something. Stand up for her." But I didn't want to cause a scene, not in front of her. In families like ours, you learn to freeze when things get cruel, to smile through gritted teeth. I had spent so many years doing this that it almost seemed normal. But it wasn't normal. Sarah was only 7. She hadn't learned to put on a mask yet, didn't know how to swallow that kind of pain. Then she looked at Frank. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a bell. "It's okay," she said. "I also made a gift for you, Grandpa." And in that moment, everything in the room changed. No one spoke, no one laughed. She reached into her coat pocket, and I knew something was about to happen that none of us were ready for. I watched her, completely still, as Sarah pulled out a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It looked small in her hands, fragile, as if it could be crumpled and discarded without a thought. But she held it like it meant something, like it mattered. I whispered, "Sarah, maybe not now." She turned to me, and in her eyes, there was something I didn't recognize, not sadness, not pain, but calmness, resolve. She nodded slightly, as if saying, "I have to do this." Then she turned back to Frank. "I made this for you," she said. Frank didn't lean forward, just looked at the paper with the same bored expression he always wore when someone dared to ask him to feel something. "Oh, really?" he muttered, taking a sip from his glass. "Drew me a snowman or something?" His voice held that sarcastic mockery he used to make you feel small without raising his voice. But Sarah didn't waver. She crossed the room and offered him the paper with both hands. I noticed her fingers were trembling. I knew that feeling when your hands betray you, when your heart pounds in your chest, and you try to be brave even though everything inside you wants to run. He took the paper as if it meant nothing, opened it with one hand while still holding his glass in the other. Then he looked at it and froze. I couldn't see what was drawn, but I saw his face. It didn't twist in confusion or annoyance as I expected. Instead, his eyebrows furrowed, he blinked once, then again. His jaw slackened as if he had forgotten what he was doing. The whole room seemed to lean forward. "What is it?" Sandra asked impatiently. He didn't answer, just stared. Sarah stood with her hands folded in front of her, quietly watching him, unsure of what would happen next. I stood up and slowly crossed the room, almost afraid to disrupt the moment. I stopped next to her and gently placed my hand on her back. She didn't look at me, her gaze remained on Frank. And he looked older than I had ever seen him, not angry, not smug, just still. He carefully, almost reverently folded the paper and placed it on the table next to his chair. Then he stood up. No one knew what to say, no one moved. He left the room without a word. The sound of his footsteps down the hall was the only thing we heard. He didn't slam the door, didn't shout, just left. I looked at Sarah. Her voice was soft when she asked, "Did I do something wrong?" I knelt beside her, hugged her, and whispered, "No, sweetheart, you did something very brave." Sandra muttered something under her breath, but this time I didn't care because I knew that whatever Sarah had drawn, whatever she had written, it had touched him in a way none of us could. She hadn't responded with anger, hadn't cried, hadn't shouted, hadn't run away. She had given him a gift. One that reminded him he was still human, even if he had forgotten. And it seemed that might have scared him more than anything. I didn't see my father for the rest of the day. He didn't return to the living room or come to dinner, even when Mom called in her sickly sweet voice that dessert was ready, pretending everything was fine. Sarah didn't mention him again that evening. She quietly played with the ribbon from one of her little gifts and helped me gather the scraps of wrapping paper, as if it were an ordinary evening. But I saw her mind was elsewhere. Every now and then, her gaze would wander to the hallway where Frank had gone, as if she were waiting for something. But nothing happened, not that day. We left early the next morning. I said we had things to do in the city, but the truth was I couldn't pretend anymore. Sandra didn't even get up to say goodbye. Mom handed me a plate of leftovers wrapped in foil and told us to drive safely. No one mentioned what had happened, no one asked how Sarah was doing, and somehow that stung even more. The drive home was quiet. Sarah watched the snow flashing past the trees. I took her hand, and at one point, she squeezed mine in return. I didn't ask about the drawing, didn't want to make her explain something so personal, didn't want to dissect the magic of that moment. But I thought about it the whole way home, what had she drawn that made my father, a man who once called me too soft for crying at a movie, pale and leave the room without a word? I found out 4 days later. A small box appeared on our porch, with no return address, only Sarah's name written in neat print on top. She opened it slowly, as if unsure whether to hope. Inside was a tiny music box, old-fashioned, wooden, with carved edges and little roses painted on the lead. It played Somewhere Over the Rainbow when Sarah turned the handle. And there was a note to the bravest girl I know. Thank you for remembering. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. Sarah pressed the music box to her chest as if it were made of gold. At first, she didn't say anything, just held it and smiled. I sat next to her on the floor and finally asked, "Sarah, what did you draw for Grandpa?" She looked at me and said, "It was a picture of him holding hands with Grandma and me." Her voice was soft. I had written that I hoped he would smile again one day because I remember how she used to make him laugh. My throat tightened, and I couldn't speak because that was the part of him I had forgotten existed. The man who once smiled laughed, before grief hardened him, before the years made him cruel. Sarah had seen through it all and given him a piece of what he thought he had lost forever. Not pity, not guilt, but hope. She wasn't trying to fix him, just reminding him that he was once a man worth remembering. And in return, he gave her something, not love, maybe not forgiveness, but a start. Sometimes that's enough. Now the music box sits on Sarah's nightstand. Every night before bed, she winds it up, not always to listen, sometimes just to hold, to feel its weight in her hands, to know it's there. Like a child holding an old toy they've outgrown but can't let go of. From that day on, she rarely spoke of him, but sometimes she mentioned Grandma, the one she never met, talking about her as if she were still here, as if Sarah knew her through my stories and the quiet space she left behind. And maybe she does. Frank never called, never sent a follow-up, never apologized, never explained. That's not his way, and maybe it never will be. But a week after the music box arrived, I received a letter. It was addressed not to Sarah but to me. Short 3 lines, written in the same shaky handwriting. I was wrong about you. She's a good girl. I hope you're doing well. No name, but I knew. And for reasons I can't explain, I cried when I read it. Not because it fixed everything, not because it mended the years of silence, or the way he looked at me as if I were a disappointment with a name tag, but because for the first time, it felt like he saw me. And more importantly, he saw Sarah, saw what I had always known, that she was special, that she had a gift for warming a room and showing people their own warmth even if they didn't deserve it. She's not loud, doesn't demand attention, but she changes things. She changed him, not completely, but enough. Enough for a man who had closed the door on the world to open it a crack. Enough for someone who believed only in harshness and silence to sit and listen to the music from a little girl's drawing. People sometimes ask, why did I go back that Christmas? Why did I let them get close to her? Why didn't I protect her better? The truth is, I thought I was protecting her. I thought that shielding her from their coldness, not talking about them, not visiting, not getting involved, would protect her heart. But Sarah didn't need protection. She needed the truth, and she needed to face them, to see the world as it is, beautiful and cruel, broken and full of hope, all intertwined. And instead of getting lost in it, she chose to add her light. She didn't need revenge, didn't even want an apology. She just wanted to give a gift. And that gift, simple as it was, did what I couldn't in 30 years. It opened a door. Not wide, not forever, but enough for a note to pass through, for a song to play in the silence, for a tired old man to remember a part of himself he thought was lost. Sarah reminded me of something that day. Sometimes kindness is the most radical act. A whisper can weigh more than a shout. And when we choose love, even when it's hard, even when it's not returned, we create something that no one can take away. A moment, a shift, a gift. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. And maybe give someone in your life a second chance today. You never know what doors it might open.